طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. حياكم الله وبياكم، أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا. Welcome everyone to today's lesson. بارك الله فيكم. As we start this course on the Fiqh of Dua, and this course is a course that I was planning on delivering a long time ago in Ramadan, actually, but it just didn't work out. Then, as all of you are aware, after Ramadan I got fairly busy with university work and the likes. However, as I deliver today's class, I deliver the class because of its importance and because of the fact that we are in a time of the year where dua is a very special place, especially when it comes to the day of Arafah, Yawm Arafah. Just like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that خير دعاء دعاء يوم عرفة, that the best of dua is the dua made on the day of Arafah. So I deliver this class inshallah ta'ala today, not because I was 100% ready for it, what I was planning on, but mainly because of the fact that, like we said, this is an opportunity that will come and go by. So I had great plans for this particular course. However, those great plans, not being able to achieve them, I suppose shouldn't stop us from at least doing what we can in order to make the most of the day of Arafah, which is going to be in a couple of days' time. And then inshallah ta'ala, after that, if Allah gives us the ability, we can continue with preparing that bigger course that involved a lot more. So what's the difference between the inshallah ta'ala future course and today's course? The main difference really is that in this particular course, we're just going to focus on some of the main concepts, right? Whereas the other course, it would also involve explanation of some of the du'as and what they mean, and also going a bit deeper. So the main source for today's and these 3 days lecture is the book of Shaykh Abdul Razak al-Badr, Fiqh al-Ad'iyati wal-Adhkar, which is a book which I wanted to teach for a very long time. And if Allah wills, inshallah, we'll start teaching it. So it's the main source. We're not going through the book word for word. We're not even going to cover everything in the book. We're not even going to cover half of what's in the book. Rather, I have, if you like, taken some of the most important points and reorganized them a little bit, and also return back to some other sources, such as some of the books of Shaykh Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala. Now, before we start with the actual course, first I would like to get you guys to join me on WooClap so that I can ask a few questions, inshallah ta'ala. Now, normally we would do a introduce myself and you introduce yourself and where you're joining us from and all of those good stuff, but there's not much time for that. So I just want to ask one thing. Before I actually start explaining, I want to ask one thing, okay? The fiqh of Dua 1. Okay, let me share the link with you. And there's going to be other questions obviously asked throughout the lesson as well to keep you engaged and make sure that everybody understands everything. But before I actually explain, there's one important question that I need to ask you and that I want you to answer, inshallah. Okay, and that question basically is, what do you want to get out of this course? In other words, what's your objective for this course? Yani, let's fast forward 3 days from today. It's Monday. We've done the last class at 9 p.m. Saudi time. We should be done by 10 p.m., whatever. Tuesday morning or Monday night before you go to sleep, right? What do you want to get out of this course? What is it? One person said an accepted dua. That's important. That's important. Someone said learn new dua. To learn the adab of making dua, to understand how to make dua properly so I can get my duas answered, inshallah. Learning how to make dua. A dua that's not rejected. Correct understanding and ability to make dua. To know essence of dua. Connect with Allah through dua and learn manners of asking Allah. Have my dua accepted. Okay. طيب. Now, all of you, barakallah fikum, your answers are very closely related. صح? You want to gain knowledge about dua, know what dua is, right? And you want to be able to make dua that is proper, that Allah is pleased with, and then eventually you want that dua to be accepted. And there's no doubt that anyone who actually makes dua, then his intention is for his dua to be accepted. That's why he made dua. Okay? But of course, as we know, everybody it has conditions that stop it from their quote and موانع. I'll give you a moment. Tell me when I'm back. Okay? I should be back by now. طيب, alhamdulillah. All right. طيب. I was going to say that no one really touched on a very important objective up until this last answer came in. Look at this answer. I want to make dua more important in everyday affairs. Turn to it more often than I do. Which brings us to the reason why I asked this question. Okay? All of you, or most of you, apart from I suppose the last person, focused on the aspect of knowledge, the aspect of knowing the what. Okay? However, really, that's not enough. That's not enough. If you leave this course with all of the knowledge about dua and a good understanding of what dua is, okay, and let's say you even make dua on the day of Arafah, that's not the objective of this course. Rather, the objective of this course, my dear brothers and sisters, and the objective of any course, any Islamic course, this should be the objective. It is transformation. Okay? The objective is that this course transforms you, makes you a different person altogether. Okay? And that happens by developing good habits. Okay? So the objective of this course, Allah yahfadhkum jami'an, is that you change and you become someone who makes regular dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And a lot of you focused on the accepted part of things, but all du'as are accepted, right? Rather, it's about making the dua itself. Why? Because dua is one of the most virtuous acts of worship, and is one of the things that draws you nearest to your Lord. So don't worry about Allah accepting your dua. Rather, it's about being someone who's connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who always turns to Allah for all of his needs, and who is not someone who's neglectful of that or heedless of that, or even worse, someone who relies on Allah's creation. And when they need something, the first thing that comes to their mind is not their Lord, rather, how can I get help from someone? Doesn't matter if that person is a professional or a family member or people on the streets, it doesn't matter. Yes, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave that important advice to one of the companions. He said to him, to Ibn Abbas, إِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ. If you ask, then ask of Allah. وَإِذَا اسْتَعَنْتَ فَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ. And if you seek aid from Allah. So My dear brothers and sisters, it's not about you knowing how to make dua only, okay? Or having one or two or three du'as accepted, or you getting what you're looking for. Maybe some of you, there's something really on your mind at the moment. Maybe there's a debt that you want to pay off. Maybe you want to get married. Maybe you have some family problems, yes? So then you come to this course or any other course, or you read up on dua with just the objective of how can I make dua so that this particular dua is accepted and this problem goes away. That's not good enough. Why? Because number one, problems will never go away. Okay, life is a test. More problems are just down the road. Okay, and secondly, it's not about your problems being solved in this world. It's about you being closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that you don't face any problems in the hereafter. So look at dua, and inshallah you will see dua, and this is one of the objectives, is that you see dua in a completely different light. Because like I said, and based on the question that I've asked and the answers that you've given me, most people don't truly understand what dua is. Okay, so dua, there's so much more to it than just it being asking Allah something. There's more to it than that. Okay, and even if you do understand the reality of dua, if Allah doesn't give you tawfiq, you won't make the dua and you won't be consistent. Okay, so inshallah ta'ala, the purpose of this course, and we hope all of you, every single one of you achieves this, is that this course changes you and makes you a completely different person. Okay, so the course structure based on that is, and this is something that it's a particular structure that I've been using for some of my courses, maybe not to the extent that I wanted to, but it's a framework that I want to use for all of my courses going forward. I didn't come up with a name for it. I don't know. Maybe it's called transformational framework or whatever, because I've told you guys many times before that knowledge is not about the transfer of information. It's about the transformation of the individual. Okay, so we need to completely change the way we look at these durus and Islamic lessons that we take. It's not how can I get more information. Okay, sometimes you have all the information that you need, but you still don't make dua. Sometimes you have all the knowledge that you need, but you still don't pray your salah on time, right? So knowledge is not about the transfer of information. It's about the transformation of the individual, which they call transformational learning, right? So this particular framework, we're going to follow 4 steps, all right? Which is, first, we're going to talk about the what, okay? What do you mean by the what? In other words, in this section, which is going to be today's session, it's all about knowing what dua is. What is dua? What's the reality of dua? You need to have what the scholars call the correct tasawwur. You need to have the correct mental image of knowing what dua really is. Because like I said, there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to dua. Okay, you need to look at dua and understand dua in light of the Quran and the Sunnah. What is dua? What is the status within Islam? What's the reality of dua compared to all other acts of worship, for example? What's the definition of dua? All of this, make sure that you don't end up being all motivated and doing a lot of actions, but then you're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? So a lot of people, for example, they might fall into innovations, or they might fall into shirk, or other than that, okay? Because of not having the correct understanding of what something truly is. So they commit shirk and they think it's tawheed. Okay? They fall into acts of innovation thinking that it's the sunnah. Okay? So first, you have to correct your understanding of dua. Okay? That's the first step. The second step is that you need to know why you should make dua. And this you can consider to be the fuel. Because like I said, you might know something and you might have a good understanding of something, but you're not motivated enough. Okay? And it could be that you're not motivated enough because you don't know the virtues of that particular thing. Okay? So sometimes we know something, but we don't know its virtues. We don't know its benefits. So we become a bit lax. Right? So tomorrow's session, which is the why, it's all about the virtues of dua, the benefits of dua, and the likes. That's the why. Okay, now you know what dua is. Okay? And you're extremely motivated to make as much dua as possible. Right? Then the next question is, how do you make dua? Now, this is now based on action steps. Right? So the first one, the what, is answering a lot of questions. The why, sort of like a motivational speech. It's kind of like a pep talk. It's kind of like all those things that will motivate you. And you should always return back to the why, by the way. Okay. Sometimes you get motivated to do something and then you forget all of the good stuff that you heard. So always go back to the why. Okay. Remind yourself of the why constantly to remind yourself of the virtues of dua. And this, like I said, this framework can apply to anything. Any transformation you want to go through, you can apply this framework to it, inshallah. Make sure you know what that thing is so that you don't end up making the wrong transformation. You want to make the right transformation. Secondly, make sure you know why you want to make that transformation and you're full of energy in order to do what it takes. And also, finally, you have to know the how, because the wrong approach will not get you there. Okay? So if you know what dua is and you know why you should make dua, but you do it completely wrong by either doing it in an innovative way or by not knowing the best times and the best places to make dua, or even falling into those impediments, like we said, those things that stop your dua from being accepted, or by not fulfilling the conditions for your dua, for your dua to be accepted, then obviously you're not going to get far. Okay? And then finally, and this is the final step when it comes to the framework, and this is on you. This is on you. As you can see, there's absolutely nothing underneath here. This is an empty bullet point, right? Why? Because this is the action step. This is what you're actually meant to do. You're meant to do this. All right, the ball is now in your court. After you have these three things to actually make dua now on a regular basis, implementing what you've learned, that's on you. And that's obviously something that a lot of people, they forget. But if you go through these 4 steps, inshallah ta'ala, whereby you understand what dua is, you understand why you should make dua, you're constantly motivated, and you know exactly how to do it, and then you actually do it and put in the effort. If you do that enough times, it will turn into a habit. And bi'idhnillah al-kareem, if you stick to the habit, it will turn into a transformation. And then before you know it, you become someone who makes dua at night, the last third of the night, makes dua between the salawat, makes dua every time something comes to your mind. Anytime you're struggling with something, the first thing that comes to your mind is, Ya Allah, you make dua. That's the first thing that comes to your mind. You feel pain, you make dua. You're in a bit of a financial struggle, you make dua. Something comes to your mind, some business opportunity, you make dua. You want to make a decision, you do istikhara, which is a form of dua. There's something that you fear, you do isti'adha, you seek refuge, which is a form of dua. You fall into a sin, you do istighfar, you seek Allah's forgiveness, which is a form of dua. You want to work on a project, you do isti'ana, you seek Allah's aid, which is a form of dua, and so on and so forth. Such that your whole life becomes a life of connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asking Him everything that you need. Now, if you reach that stage, bi'idhnillah al-kareem, you will become from a wali from the awliya of Allah. You will become from a wali from the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no doubt. If you are someone who's connected like that to Allah. And we'll explain why. Because dua is the biggest manifestation of a person's tawheed and the biggest side of a person's connection to Allah. And all you need to do is just contemplate on the Quran and the prophets and the messengers and the righteous people Allah talked about in the Quran. Just look at them and look at it and how much dua they made. Then you will know. Then you will know. طيب. Bismillah. واضح? Is that clear, everyone? طيب. حياكم الله. طيب, ممتاز. Okay, then let's start. Allah make it easy. It's not going to be easy, like I said to you, to try and fit this into an hour and a half. And you know it's an hour and a half, by the way. It's not 1 hour lesson, because I know I would never be able to fit this into 1 hour. I'm almost halfway already. So we say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We start off with, and in this section, we talk about the reality of dua. What is dua really? And the first thing we'll cover is the definition of dua. What is the definition of dua? Okay. Now the scholars, generally speaking, when they talk about a religious concept, they talk about a ta'rif, which is definition. They say lughatan wa istilahan. So they always mention the lexical meaning or the linguistic origin of a word, and then they talk about the technical definition of it, which is what is meant by it in our religion. Okay, so the different words in Islam, they have an original linguistic meaning, which is closely related to the actual religious meaning, the technical meaning. So the lexical meaning of dua is, yani dua linguistically means to call someone or something. Okay, so just like Ibn Faris, it's a famous linguistic or language expert, rahmatullahi alayh, who's got a book called Maqayis al-Lugha, one of the most important books when it comes to the Arabic language, an amazing dictionary if you like. He says that كلمة الدعاء في الأصل مصدر من قولك دعوت الشيء أدعوه دعاء وهو أن تميل الشيء إليك بصوت وكلام يكون بك. Basically, dua, I mean, this is again, the English that I've given you here is kind of like a easier version of it, but it's kind of like to call someone or something and to grab their attention. All right, that's what it means linguistically. But what we're interested in is the technical definition. What does it mean in our religion? What does dua mean in our religion? Dua technically means that the servant requests from his Lord that which benefits him or to alleviate or repel what harms him. That's basically dua. That you request from Allah and you ask Allah that which benefits you, or that you ask Allah to alleviate you from a harm that has befallen you, or to repel it, which is even better. Prevention is better than cure. That you actually make dua before it actually happens, so that Allah repels it from you. واضح? So that's a definition given by Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, who mentioned that. Okay? قال طلب ما ينفع الداعي وطلب كشف ما يضره أو دفعه. And he mentions that dua in our religion, it's only meant for when the servant calls his Lord. So that's the difference basically between su'al and dua. Su'al means to ask. Okay? You can ask others besides Allah. You can do su'al. Okay? With its conditions. Okay? You shouldn't, but there are some occasions whereby you're allowed to ask other people. Right? That is su'al. But you never say, for example, I made dua to that person if you request something from him. No, that's only for Allah. Dua is that when you ask from Allah. That's why some scholars, they define it more like when someone lowly asks someone high. Okay? Which we can't accept in the general sense, but more in a specific sense, that lowly as in servant asking the highest, i.e. the Lord. That can be dua. Anything else is not considered to be dua. Now, obviously, someone might argue and say, yeah, but Ustad, there are people that make dua to other than Allah. Are we going to say now that it's not called dua? No, it is called dua, but it's dua batil. It's a false dua. واضح? It's false dua. Just like ibadah. Okay, ibadah only belongs to Allah. True ibadah, the one that you get rewarded for, the one that Allah has created you for, the purpose of your life is the ibadah to your Lord. But if somebody worships others besides Allah, na'am, we're going to say that you worshipped someone besides Allah, i.e. you're a mushrik. But that dua, that ibadah of yours is batil, it's false. It's not true ibadah. So here we're talking about the true dua, the dua that when you look in the Quran and the Sunnah, that talks about its virtues and benefits and the thing that Allah loves, then that's the dua which is only to Allah. If it's to other than Allah, it is dua, but is it dua in other than its place, and it's a false dua, and everything the Prophet said about the virtues of dua do not apply to it. Okay? طيب. Now there's a benefit here to be taken from this, from the actual definition of dua, which is since dua is to request that which benefits or to repel or alleviate that which is harmful, then like Ibn al-Qayyim mentions, he says, وَمَنْ يَمْلِكُ الضُّرَّ وَالنَّفْعَ فَإِنَّهُ هُوَ الْمَعْبُودُ حَقًّا. He says, therefore, the one who possesses and in whose hands are all benefit, or to give benefit, or to alleviate harm, then he is the one that should be worshipped, truly worshipped. And he is the one that should truly be called upon. Yani, if the objective of your dua and the definition of dua is that you ask that which benefits or to lift any harm, then it only makes sense that that dua is then directed to the one who is able to give you that benefit or to ward that harm from you. If not, then your dua doesn't make sense. And how can that be dua? واضح? So المعبود لابد أن يكون مالكا للنفع والضر. So the person being called upon or being worshipped has to be someone, has to be the one who is what? Able to benefit you or to alleviate harm. And Allah Ta'ala has mentioned this in many places in the Quran. Okay? Refuting the mushrikun. Allah said, وَيَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَضُرُّهُمْ وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُم. They worship besides Allah that can't harm them and will not benefit them. Complete waste, not just of time, complete waste of their lives in this world and hereafter, since they've condemned themselves by this action to hellfire. And they get nothing out of it because this person they're worshipping, calling upon, does not have the ability to protect you from evil or to bring about benefit without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the ayat, the verses regarding that are many. فإن المعبود لابد أن يكون مالكا للنفع والضر فهو يدعى للنفع ودفع الضرار. So the person being worshipped or called upon has to be one who possesses the ability to benefit you or to ward harm from you, because he is called and we only request something from him for the harm, for the harm to be warded from us and for us to gain benefit. So that's the whole objective why we call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some synonyms of dua, in other words, some words that are quite closely related to dua, but there are differences. Okay? Are, first we have su'al. As-su'al. Just like Prophet ﷺ said, وَإِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ. And also in the famous hadith that mentions Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends to the lower heavens, it mentions that Allah ta'ala says, مَنْ يَدْعُونِي فَأَسْتَجِيبَ لَهُ مَنْ يَسْأَلُنِي فَأُعْطِيَهُ. Who will call upon me such that I respond to their dua, and who will ask of me such that I may give them or give him. Now this hadith shows you that there's a difference between dua and su'al. Of course, we can go in depth about exactly what the difference is, but it really comes down to the fact that, like the Shaykh mentions here, الداعي أعم من السائل, that making dua is something more general than just asking. واضح? Why is that the case? We'll talk about that later, because dua has two types. It has multiple meanings, right? So dua, it's more general than just asking. واضح? Dua is just more general than asking Allah for something. Okay? Dua is more general than that. واضح? So dua is more general than su'al. In other words, every su'al of Allah is dua. But not every dua has to manifest itself as a su'al. Again, every su'al, and I hope you know what su'al in Arabic means to ask. Okay? So every request or asking, yes, is a dua when you ask Allah. It's called dua. Ask Allah for anything, it's called dua. Oh Allah, give me this dua, all of it. But dua, not everything that's called dua is actually a su'al. Yani you asking Allah. Sometimes you can make dua without asking. That's the point, and we'll talk about that later. Sometimes you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without even moving your tongue. So dua is more general than that. Then we have isti'ana. We mentioned these things before. Isti'ana means to seek aid. It's a form of dua. Istighatha, to seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially in very difficult situations, is a form of dua. So you'll find these words in the Quran or a hadith. Isti'ana, just like we say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ. In other words, oh Allah, you alone we worship and you alone we ask for help. In other words, you alone we make dua to. Because isti'ana is a form of dua. Likewise istighatha, likewise isti'adah. Okay? Likewise istighfar. And likewise, I didn't write this one down. Isti'adah means to seek refuge, and istighfar means to seek forgiveness. And also shafa'ah. Also shafa'ah, major misconceptions that people have. Shafa'ah is dua. Shafa'ah is dua. Okay? It's when someone asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on your behalf. We ask Allah Ta'ala to grant us the shafa'ah of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam on the day of judgment. Right? That's shafa'ah. Okay, so shafa'ah is dua. Someone else making dua for you. That's shafa'ah. واضح? So that's also a form of dua. Also a form of dua. So all of these things. And the reason why I'm showing you these synonyms of dua is because some of the rulings that you will hear regarding dua, especially when it comes to dua being a right that exclusively belongs to Allah, it applies to all of this as well. Apart from the first one, obviously, because we explained the difference. Okay? The su'al doesn't necessarily have to be to Allah only. But these other ones, yes. I mean, there are some, even istighatha as well. Yani some of them, they are an act of worship. They're solely an act of worship, and some of them are not. Okay, so those that are solely an act of worship only belong to Allah, such as istighfar and the likes. واضح? طيب. Then we have the different types of dua. I'm going to ask you this question on WooClap actually. Dua is two types. Who knows? What are two types of dua? And after we explain this, you'll see dua in a completely different light. Inshallah. Dua of glorification and dua of request. Okay, dua of worship and of need. Now, so obviously the English translation might differ, but na'am, which is what we call in Arabic dua al-mas'alati and dua al-ibadah. Someone said am dua and khas dua. I don't know what you mean by that. If you mean by that dua al-ibadah is am and dua al-mas'ala is khas, if you mean that, then fine. If you mean something else, I don't know. Na'am, so it's called, someone said, what is istighatha? Istighatha means to seek help. Means to seek help, but especially in difficult situations. It's like a high level of dua, right? It's like when you're in a very difficult situation, you do istighatha, all right? Yeah, to rescue, if you like, to seek rescue. Now, type. Naam, so these are two types of dua, which is dua of asking, dua al-mas'ala, which is when you explicitly ask Allah for something with your tongue. And this is when we say dua, that's the first thing that comes to your mind. Sah? Every person, they hear dua, Muhammad made dua, that's what comes to your mind. Muhammad explicitly asked Allah for something with his tongue. واضح? So that's the first thing that comes to your mind. But there's also another type of dua, which is also called dua, all right, which you really need to pay attention to because you'll find it in the Quran. Okay? A lot. You're using dua for this meaning, which is implicitly asking Allah for Jannah and salvation from hellfire by way of your actions. Now, this one doesn't involve your tongue. Here you're asking Allah, and you're asking Him not for something specific, you're asking Him, you're not asking Him for detailed things, you're just asking Him for that one objective that all of us have, which is going to Jannah and being saved from hellfire. So like Allah said, فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ. That whoever is saved from the hellfire and entered into Jannah, then he is successful. حَوْلَهَا نُدَنْدٍ, like Prophet ﷺ said. This is all of our objectives. We have no other objective. Objective is to go to Jannah, be saved from hellfire. All of us are asking Allah to take us to Jannah and save us from hellfire by way of our actions. In other words, every single act of worship that you do is dua. That's why it's called dua al-ibadah. Okay? Because you're implicitly, I mean, why are you fasting the month of Ramadan? It's as if you're saying, oh Allah, I'm fasting for your sake so that you can save me from hellfire. Why do you do Hajj? Oh Allah, I'm performing Hajj so that you may be pleased with me and enter me to Jannah. واضح? Why do you abstain from things that are haram? Because it's like you asking Allah, oh Allah, save me from hellfire by my abstention from this haram. Okay? This is what we call what? Dua ul-ibadah. Dua ul-ibadah. So again, what's the difference between the two? I'm going to go explain in more detail now, inshallah. Okay? What's the difference between the two? Now, in one way, they're actually the same. Okay. Ustad, you're confusing us. Okay, let me read to you what Sheikh Sa'di said, rahimahullah. He said, كل ما ورد في القرآن من الأمر بالدعاء والنهي عن دعاء غير الله والثناء على الداعين يتناول دعاء المسألة ودعاء العبادة. Any place you see in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands with dua or warns against and prohibits making dua to other than Allah and praising those who make dua, then that includes both dua al-mas'ala and dua al-ibadah. Includes both. واضح? So if you see dua, it includes both meanings. It includes both meanings. Okay? So, this is an example given by Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. For example, Allah says in the Quran, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. Allah says, if my servants ask you about me, then tell them that I'm close. I respond and answer the call or the dua of the one who makes dua when he calls upon me. Here he mentions that this includes both types of du'as. That's why some people, they gave the tafsir saying that I will give him if he asks of me. That's the dua al-mas'ala. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. If he asks of me, tell my servants that I'm close. If they ask of me, I will give them. That's dua al-mas'ala. That's what comes to your mind when you hear dua. But also he says it also includes the meaning of أُثِيبُهُ إِذَا عَبَدَنِي. That I will reward him if he worships me. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ also means I will reward him if he worships me. That's a response, Allah responding to your ibadah, which is a dua. Because with your ibadah, you're asking Allah to be saved from hellfire. So our whole life is one big dua. Our whole life is one big dua. Allah is saying that if you ask of me, either explicitly by saying, oh Allah, give me, or you want me to enter you into Jannah, but you ask me implicitly by worshipping me and obeying me and staying away from that which I have prohibited you from, I will answer both of those requests. The explicit one, I will give you what you asked me of. The implicit one, I will allow you to reach your goal of going to Jannah or being saved from hellfire if you worship me and you obey me. واضح? So this is a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, that whichever these two du'as that you do, Allah will accept them both. Now, this, my dear brothers and sisters, it might be a little bit confusing, right? But this is not the only thing in our religion. It's not the only place in our religion where two words are kind of like the same and different. They're the same and different. This comes under a general principle that the scholars, they talk about, which is إِذَا اجْتَمَعَ افترق وإذا افترق اجتمع, they say. In other words, these are words that when they are by themselves isolated, you say them. For example, I'll give you an example. Islam and Iman. Islam and Iman. Okay? When Allah says, وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا أَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ, or هُوَ سَمَّاكُمُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِ, or any place in the Quran that talks about Islam and Muslims, right? i.e. the true Muslims, then that also includes Iman. In other words, a true Muslim is also a mu'min. واضح? Iman, same thing. If someone has Iman, he's a Muslim. So there are two things that if you mention them separately by themselves, it includes the other word. It includes the other word. Okay, so a Muslim is someone with Iman, and a mu'min is someone who is Muslim. Okay, so why are they then two different words? Why not just stick to one word? Why do we now have two different words? It's because when they come together, in other words, when they're mentioned in the same context, they're both mentioned together. I'm talking about Islam and Iman together. I'm telling you the difference between Islam and Iman. Or I'm saying to you, for example, in one context, I'm talking about both. Just like Allah says that some of the Arab, they said, آمنا, we believed. Allah said, قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. Allah said, you didn't truly believe, but say, أسلمنا, we have submitted. We're Muslims. The scholars, they mentioned that Iman is a higher level than Islam. Right? So Islam and Iman are different in multiple ways. Number one, Islam is the outward actions. Iman is on the inside, the Iman in your heart. Islam has 5 pillars, which are outward actions, such as the Shahada and Salah and Siyam and Hajj and Zakah. Whereas Iman has other pillars, which all take place in the heart. Okay, so Islam and Iman are two different words. However, if they're mentioned separately by themselves, then it also includes the other. Same thing here when it comes to dua and ibadah, dua al-mas'ala and dua al-ibadah, right? If dua is mentioned by itself, it includes both. It includes both. Okay, just like Sheikh Ibn Sa'di mentions here. If you see dua in the Quran, it includes both. But if we want to compare and contrast the two, dua al-mas'ala and dua al-ibadah, then two different things. Dua al-mas'ala is when you explicitly request. Dua al-ibadah is when you worship. One is explicit with your tongue, one is implicit with your actions. Okay? واضح? Now, out of these two, the dua al-ibadah is obviously more general. The dua al-ibadah, which is ibadah, what you know as ibadah, worship, it's more general. Why? Because dua is a form of worship. صح? When you make dua, you're worshiping Allah. So dua al-ibadah is more general. But one of the forms of dua of ibadah is dua al-mas'ala, when you ask Allah and you call upon Him. And this, like the Prophet said, is mukhul ibadah. It's the essence of worship. In other words, out of all of the acts of worship that you do, ibadah is right up there. One of the most virtuous acts of worship that you can do. When you ask Allah something. واضح? That's its status amongst all other acts of ibadah. But having said that, dua applies to all acts of worship. They're all dua. All of them are dua. Now, your head might be spinning. You might say, this might be a completely, if you like, new concept to you, right? However, it's very important. Why is it important? Because it allows you to understand the Quran properly. So when Allah Ta'ala says, for example, Shaykh Islam here, he talks about it. He says, فَعُلِمَ أَنَّ النَّوْعَيْنِ مُتَلَازِمَانِ. These two things, they go hand in hand together. Dua al-mas'ala and dua al-ibadah. They go hand in hand together. Okay? So dua al-ibadah mustalzimun li dua al-mas'ala. Dua al-ibadah includes dua al-mas'ala. And dua al-mas'ala is part of dua al-ibadah. وَكُلُّ دُعَاءُ مَسْأَلَةٍ مُتَضَمِّنٌ لِدُعَاءِ الْعِبَادَةِ. And every dua mas'ala, when you ask Allah of something, then it is also a dua of ibadah. Okay? And then he explains here at the end, he says, and there's other things he said as well. There's actually, as a matter of fact, here Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he gives multiple examples from the Quran. وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمُ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ قُلْ مَا يَعْبَأُ بِكُمْ رَبِّي لَوْلَا دُعَاؤُكُمْ إِنَّ رَبِّي لَسَمِيعُ الدُّعَاءِ. He goes to every single example and shows you how it means both, or which of the two it means. واضح? Very beautiful. But he says here at the end, فَتَأَمَّلْهُ, contemplate on this. فَإِنَّهُ مَوْضُوعٌ عَظِيمٌ النَّفْعِ. He says this is a very important and beneficial topic. وَقَلَّ مَنْ يُفْطَنُ لَهُ, and only a few people really truly understand it. وَأَكْثَرُ آيَاتِ الْقُرْآنِ, and most of the verses in the Quran دَالَةٌ عَلَى مَعْنَيَيْنِ فَصَاعِدًا, and most of the verses in the Quran where you have a word that might have multiple meanings, فَهِيَ مِنْ هَذَا الْقَبِيلِ, then it comes under this topic. In other words, Islam and Iman. Okay? Taqwa and Iman. Okay? There's a relationship between those words. Right? These are words that إِذَا اجْتَمَعَ افترقا إِذَا افترقا اجْتَمَعَ. It's a major concept which is beyond the scope of this course. However, the conclusion that I want you to take away from this is, number one, that your whole life is one big dua. Keep that in mind. Okay? Which means it should only be for Allah, all of your acts of worship. And that dua al-ibadah is more general than the other. Okay? Again, if I were to have two circles, actually, I wish I had a pen. So if you have two circles, okay, then the bigger circle would be dua al-ibadah, and the smaller circle within that circle would be dua al-mas'ala. Okay, so dua al-mas'ala is a form of ibadah. واضح? But they're both called du'as. Right. What are other religious concepts that are related to dua? We're not going to talk about this today. but inshallah something you could look forward to when we go into more detail talking about dua is the relationship between dua and ibadah, number one. That's very important. And when I talk about ibadah, I'm talking about the general meaning. صح? Just like Allah said, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, I did not create mankind and jinn except that they worship me alone. صح? Now what's the relationship between dua and ibadah? Like for example, in this sentence, right? Likewise, and like I said, the relationship truly is, if you want to know, ibadah is more general, and dua is a specific form of ibadah. When we talk about dua al-mas'ala, not if we talk about dua al-ibadah. Dua al-ibadah and ibadah are the same thing. Dua al-mas'ala, the one that comes to your mind, which is requesting Allah from Allah that which you want, it is one of the best acts of worship. That's the relation between dua and ibadah. Okay? Then we have the relation between dhikr and dua. Because again, there are two words that really, dua is dhikr, isn't it? You do dua, you're remembering Allah, aren't you? Sah? And there's a lot of forms of dhikr which are actually dua. For example, there is a dua for al-karb. Dua al-karb is called. The dua that you make when you are going through a calamity. Now that dua, it doesn't have any specific talab or request in it. That dua says, La ilaha illallah al-azim al-halim, La ilaha illallah rabbul arsh al-kareem, La ilaha illallah rabbul samawat wa rabbul ardi wa rabbul arsh al-kareem. It's just all praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and saying kalimatul tawheed. But at the same time, it's called dua. Or Yunus alayhi salam, when he was in the belly of the whale, the dua that he made, the Prophet said that whoever makes that dua, Allah will accept from him. Yes? What's the dua? La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin. It's just nothing but thana and acknowledging his mistake. He didn't request, he didn't say, oh Allah save me. He just praised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and acknowledged his shortcomings. واضح? So there's a very close relationship between dhikr and dua. واضح? But again, these are two words, like we said, which, if you mention them by themselves, it includes the other. So your dhikr is dua, because it's worship. Okay? And your dua is dhikr, because you're remembering Allah. But if you mention them together, you contrast them. If they're mentioned in one context, then they have different meanings. واضح? Then we have dua and tawakkul. What's the relationship between dua and tawakkul? Relying upon Allah. What's the relationship between dua and tawheed? Important one. And what's the relationship between dua and aqidah? Very important one as well. I'm just going to touch on this one. I'm going to share something with you when it comes to dua and aqidah. And like I said, all of these, they could be lectures all by themselves, but we have dua and aqidah. Dua and aqidah. What's the relationship between the two? Okay, let me ask you guys actually before I answer. And by the way, before I ask that question, I have to ask this question. Are you lost? Because I know I went into some very detailed topic earlier. I hope you're still here. Okay, alhamdulillah. Barakallahu feekum. Now, saying subhanallah dua. Yes, I mean it's dua in a sense that it's ibadah. Okay. And in some ways, yes, it's dua. In some ways, no, it's more dhikr. It depends what you mean by dua. If we're talking about dua al-mas'ala, and that's why someone just asked me now, is saying subhanallah dua. Okay, now in this hadith that in this ayah that we mentioned about Yunus alayhi salam, la ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin, he says subhanaka, and he says la ilaha illa anta. So is saying subhanallah dua? The answer to that is yes, if you mean dua al-ibadah. Why? Because you're glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is something that pleases Allah, and because of that glorification, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will love you and Allah will enter you to Jannah, and you're more likely to get whatever you want. Okay? That's dua al-ibadah. If you mean, is it dua as in dua al-mas'ala, as in the dua that comes to your mind, the dua that will always come to your mind, which is dua al-mas'ala, then the answer is no. SubhanAllah is not dua al-mas'ala. It's not the dua whereby you explicitly request something with your tongue. واضح? So now, does it make more sense, the importance of differentiating between dua al-ibadah and dua al-mas'ala? Because you will read the ayat of the Quran and you will come across a hadith where a certain act of ibadah is called dua, and you'll be confused. You'll be like, huh? How is this dua? واضح? طيب. Can you go through all the points in the section? Hopefully I will. طيب. Inshallah, those that did not understand it, write down exactly what you don't understand, and I'll try to explain it again later on بإذن الله الكريم, if possible at the end of the class, or you could rewatch it, inshallah. Now the next question is, what's the relationship between dua and your aqidah? Aqidah being your creed, obviously your belief. Now, so someone mentioned, Barakallahu fik, ahsant ya Muawiyah. Ustad means if one is mentioned, then the meaning includes the other. Only if mentioned together, then meaning is different. Yes. If mentioned together, that's when we can contrast. واضح? Dua is part of aqidah. It will lead to your dua being accepted. Strengthens your relationship plus connection to Allah. Okay. Extremely close, because without belief there's no dua. Dua solidifies your aqidah. This one is close. You're getting somewhere here. Okay. Manifestation of aqidah as well. You're getting very close. The stronger conviction that dua will be answered, the stronger aqidah. It can make or break it. If you make dua on the correct aqidah, you'll have a stronger trust in Allah. But if you make dua to other than Allah, you can leave Islam. Naam. So, barakallahu feekum. I want you to contemplate on this statement. Where are we? Naam. Now, dua represents the strength of your iman in Allah and your knowledge of Him. It's kind of like a manifestation. واضح? So, one of the scholars called Ibn Aqil said, قد ندب الله تعالى إلى الدعاء فهو في ذلك معان. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has encouraged us to make dua, and that's for multiple reasons. Okay, and there's many meanings behind that. Okay, why we should make dua, especially when it comes to its connection to our aqidah. Number one, أحدها الوجود فإن من ليس بموجود لا يدعى. Okay. Number one is that it strengthens and is a manifestation of your aqidah in the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is that? Because you don't call upon someone or something that doesn't exist. So every single time you make dua, you are manifesting your aqidah in the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it gets stronger and stronger. Okay? It's not the same someone who doesn't call upon Allah regularly. Yes? And someone who does, when it comes to their connection with Allah and their realization and their iman and yaqeen in Allah's existence, not the same. واضح? So the stronger in your iman regarding that, the more you'll call upon Him. Likewise, al-ghina, the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-ghani. Everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that He is not in need of any of His creation, and that all of His creation are in need of Him. فَإِنَّ الْفَقِيرَ لَا يُدْعَى, because the one who is faqir, who doesn't own or possess anything, nobody requests anything from him. So when you request from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you wealth, you request from Him to give you children, you request from Him to guide you to Islam, you request from Him to cure you, you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-ghani, who has the ability to do those things. That's why you called upon Him. Likewise, as-sam', hearing. Allah is the all-hearer. Why? Because the one that can't hear is not called upon. So that's also a strengthening of your iman, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as-sami'. That Allah is as-sami'. That's why you're calling upon Him. Likewise, al-karam, generosity. فَإِنَّ الْبَخِيلَ لَا يُدْعَى. The person who is stingy, nobody asks him anything. So every time you call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are strengthening your faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most generous. And that's why you're calling upon Him. Okay? So again, my dear brothers and sisters, sometimes our faith is strengthened. As a matter of fact, most of the time, it is strengthened by our actions. If you live in according to that which you believe, this will strengthen your belief and your conviction. واضح? And if you oppose that which you believe in something, but your actions oppose it, that will weaken your belief. That's why al-iman yazidu wa yanqus. Iman increases and decreases. What increases iman? Ta'at, righteous good deeds increase your iman. And since they decrease your iman, because it's kind of like a stamp that you're giving to yourself that I truly believe in this. Every time you do a good deed, you're reinforcing your belief. So with making dua, you're reinforcing your belief in all of these things that you already believe in. Ar-Rahmah as well, that Allah, He is the most merciful, because Al-Qasi, the one who is cruel, one who doesn't have mercy, nobody calls upon him. There's no point asking someone something if they have no mercy and they're cruel and they have no heart. Likewise, Al-Qudra, ability, that Allah is Al-Qadir. فَإِنَّ الْعَاجِزَ لَا يُدْعَى. The person who is ajiz, incapable, nobody asks him anything. So when you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a child at old age, this is strengthening your belief that Allah ta'ala is Qadir. Allah is capable of everything. So Zakaria alayhi salam, when he said, رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْنِي فَرْدًا وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الْوَارِثِينَ, at the old age, his wife, old age as well. Highly unlikely. I mean, from the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the sunnah of Allah is, people don't have children at that age. But because of his conviction that Allah ta'ala is Al-Qadir, he made that dua. Now, if he didn't have that conviction, if Zakaria alayhi salam, or any other prophet for that, like even Yunus alayhi salam, in the belly of a whale, if he alayhi salam did not have the conviction and the strong iman that Allah, that he has in Allah ta'ala's ability, that Allah can save him from that predicament, he wouldn't have called upon Allah in that state. He would have just given up. Khalas, I'm done, I'm finished. There's no point. There's no way. I'm in the belly of a whale, the darkness of the night, in the middle of the sea. I've got no hope. La, he had hope. Why? Because of his iman in the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the opposite is also true. The opposite is also true. That if you are weak in your iman, in any of these things and many other things as well, and that's why that here comes the connection between dua and the names and attributes of Allah. That's the connection. Extremely strong connection. That's what Allah says in the Quran, وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا. And to Allah belong the perfect names. The most noble and the perfect names. Most beautiful names. فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا. So call upon Allah by way of those names. So you say, Ya Razzaq urzuqni. Or the one who provides, provide for me. Ya Rahman irhamni. Ya Ghaffar ighfirli. That's the connection between your aqidah in the perfect names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your dua. That's the connection. The stronger your iman, the stronger your dua. The weaker your iman, the weaker your dua. So what causes someone when they are in a difficult situation? What causes them to give up, even give up on making dua? What causes them to do that? Ask yourself. Someone is in a very difficult situation, extremely difficult situation. Maybe Allah protect us. Maybe stage 4 cancer. Maybe family member is, intensive care. Maybe he lost all of his wealth. Okay, in a very sticky, difficult situation. What causes someone in that state to give up and to even give up on calling upon Allah? He doesn't even take it upon himself to even call upon Allah in that state. What causes him? The weakness of his iman. For indeed, if his iman was strong, he would never have given up calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Never. Doesn't matter what situation you're in. You would never give up when it comes to making dua. Why? Because you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you want something, then like some scholars they mention, فَإِنَّهَا بَيْنَ الْكَافِ وَالنُّونِ. It's between kaf and noon. In other words, all it takes that Allah says, couldn't be, فَيَكُونَ, and it will become. That's all it takes. Okay? Which shows you the importance of strengthening your aqeedah and learning tawheed. Shows you the importance. For indeed, a strong aqeedah means that you will gain your objectives in this world and hereafter. And not just only on an individual level. I'm not just talking about you and your situation and I and my, no. Even on the level of the ummah. Even on the level of the ummah. The strongest weapon that we have and our hope only lies in dua. And our dua will never be a dua that is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless we fulfill its conditions. And one of the conditions of dua is that you have the correct aqeedah, especially when it comes to calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not calling upon others besides Him. So if that's the case, then no matter how dire our situation looks like as an ummah, we should never lose hope as long as we can make dua. And our dua will never be successful unless we fix up our aqeedah. So looking at it through this lens, you can see where the solution to the problems of the ummah lie. It lies in correcting their aqeedah. Because if the ummah corrects its aqeedah and they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way they should believe in Allah, and not those people, for example, that deny the names and attributes of Allah. I mean, there's certain sects amongst the ummah that say, oh, don't say Allah is Sami', don't say Allah is this and this, because they say that they deny Allah's names and attributes. Now, if you deny Allah's names and attributes, are you going to make dua? You're going to become exactly what this scholar talked about. Al-Ghani, فَإِنَّ الْفَقِيرَ لَا يُدْعَى فَإِنَّ الْأَصَمْ لَا يُدْعَى. If you believe Allah can't hear you, why are you going to make dua upon Him? If you don't believe Allah is the most generous, why would you ask of Him? Sah? So, correcting the ummah's aqeedah, okay, is the only way for our collective du'as to be accepted. We can shout at the top of our lungs if we want, all day, any day, okay? But if Allah is not pleased with us because of our corrupt aqeedah, or we're calling upon Allah and others besides Allah, as an ummah, we'll get nowhere, okay? Now, again, actually making the dua is one thing. Actually, the aqeedah being correct is one thing, but even making the dua itself is, a lot of the people that talk about the problems of the ummah, they don't even acknowledge the importance of calling upon Allah. Rather, they're quick to hit the streets and knock on the doors of Allah's creation. The ummah is going through trouble. Rarely do you find someone saying, okay, let's make dua, let's correct people's aqeedahs, let's teach people how to make dua. For indeed, every Muslim whose dua is accepted is another, benefit. Let's do this. They don't do that. Rather, activism, let's go to the streets, let's knock on the door, let's apply to United Nations, let's do this, let's protest. That's knocking on the door of the creation, when everything is the hand of the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right. Then we have, and this is actually, first we'll talk about the ruling of making dua. What is the ruling of making dua? Okay, and if you don't know what we mean by ruling, it means hukum. In Islam, the ahkam, especially ahkam al-taklifiyya, which is the one we're talking about here, there are five rulings when it comes to the rulings in our religion, when it comes to our actions. One, it could be wajib, it could be mustahab, it could be mubah, permissible, as in it could be something obligatory, it could be something recommended, it could be something that's permissible, it could be something that is makruh, and it could be something that is haram. Okay, now dua, I'm talking about the correct dua, not talking about dua to other than Allah. I'm talking about correct dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that fulfills the conditions. What's its ruling? طيب. A lot of you said wajib. Wajib because of al-Fatiha. Okay, That's a good point. نعم أحسنتم بارك الله فيكم. So my dear brothers and sisters, dua is an obligation. And if you don't make dua, Allah will be angry with you. You'll be in trouble. Okay? It is something you'll be asked about on the day of judgment. So you actually taking part in today's lesson, you are attending and benefiting from something that allows you to complete a wajib from one of the wajibat upon you. واضح? And if you don't know how to make dua, you don't know these things, then of course, I'm not going to say my lesson, but to attend a lesson on dua is wajib upon you. Because there's no way for you to perform something that is wajib except by knowing about it. And anything that you need in order to fulfill a wajib becomes wajib. So you seeking knowledge and learning about dua and how to make it and its rulings is wajib upon you. Why is it wajib upon you? Because it's wajib upon you to make dua. واضح? Now the proof for this, that making dua is wajib, is a statement of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, مَنْ لَمْ يَسْأَلِ اللَّهِ يَغْضَبْ عَلَيْهِ. Whoever doesn't ask of Allah, Allah will become angry with him. And this is the book, by the way, Fiqh of Dua Course. It's a PDF from Sheikh Abzaq al-Badar's website. Share it with you, inshallah, in the channel. So, مَنْ لَمْ يَسْأَلِ اللَّهِ يَغْضَبْ عَلَيْهِ. Or مَنْ لَمْ يَدْعُ اللَّهَ سُبْحَانَهُ غَضِبَ عَلَيْهِ. Sorry, that's the hadith. مَنْ لَمْ يَدْعُ اللَّهَ سُبْحَانَهُ غَضِبَ عَلَيْهِ. So the Shaykh mentions وَهَذَا فِيهِ دَلِيلٌ عَلَى حُبِّ اللَّهِ لِلدُّعَاء وَحُبِّهِ سُبْحَانَهُ لِعَبْدِهِ الَّذِي يَدْعُوهُ وَلِذَا فَإِنَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ يَغْضَبُ مِنْ عَبْدِهِ إِذَا تَرَكَ دُعَاءَهُ ولا ريب أن هذا فيه دليل على أن الدعاء من العبد لربه من أهم الواجبات, one of the most important obligations upon you. واضح? Why? Because it's you have to avoid the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a matter of fact, not making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a manifestation of your arrogance. If you're someone like that, may Allah protect us. Why? Because Allah said in the Quran, Allah said in the Quran, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. And your Lord said, call upon me, I'll respond to your calls. Make dua of me and I'll respond. Which we said includes both. Worship me and ask of me. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادَتِي. Those who are arrogant. They're too arrogant to worship me. And again, here, this shows you that dua in the Quran means ibadah. Because here Allah said, call upon me, make dua of me. And then Allah said, those who are arrogant, an ibadati. Allah didn't say an du'ai. Those who are arrogant of calling upon me. Allah said, those who are arrogant of worshipping me. Because ud'uni means worship me as well. So those who are arrogant of worshipping Allah and calling upon Him, سَيَدْخُلُونَ جَهَنَّمَ دَاخِرِينَ. Allah said, they will enter into hellfire humiliated. واضح? So you have to make dua. Now, of course, there's a minimum and there's no maximum. Minimum obviously being 5 times a day you pray. So you pray your salah in Surah Al-Fatiha. You make dua 17 times, and within the salah itself, there's so many acts of dua. So if you're just someone who prays their 5 daily prayers on time, inshallah, you will have fulfilled the minimum of having to call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But still, you should also call upon Him before the salah, after the salah, and whenever you can. Okay? Right. That's the ruling of making dua. But now we're going to talk about some things that are unique to dua. And what I mean by unique to dua is some things that applies to dua specifically compared to all other acts of worship. Okay? There's a beautiful poetry, lines of poetry that say, والله يغضب إن تركت سؤاله وبني آدم حين يسأل يغضب. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes angry with you if you leave off asking Him. Whereas the son of Adam, he becomes angry when you ask him. SubhanAllah, look at the contrast. Allah becomes angry with you if you don't ask him. Now compare that to the son of Adam. When you ask him a few times, that's when he blocks your number. Some people make dua in congregation. Is that ever permissible in any case? Yeah, I mean, it depends what you mean by in congregation. The specific non-permissible is the one where people do it after salah, after every salah. That's not permissible because Prophet didn't do that. However, for example, sometimes in the durus, when the scholars they're teaching or the likes, or maybe certain occasions, maybe at a funeral, to make dua for someone who passed away or whatever, then it's permissible. It's permissible under certain occasions, as long as it's not turned into a habit whereby every time that happens, people they turn into a habit to make dua. But what's not permissible is that after every salah, the imam turns around and makes dua with the congregation. Why? Because Prophet didn't do that. Someone said that Allah inspires you to make dua. Okay, make sure what you tell me is kind of like unique to dua. Can be unrestrictedly like adhkar. Okay, that doesn't make it unique to dua. You can ask in your own words. It shows your dependence on Allah. Allah answers all the dua. If it's not in this dunya, then it is in the akhirah, or He preserves you from bad things. Okay, now can use wording which aren't necessarily in the sunnah as long as it doesn't break conditions. It requires humbling ourselves before Allah and showing that we are weak and are in need of Allah. Now, okay. Barakallah feekum. Let me tell you a few things that are unique to dua. Okay. The first one is that dua is the key to all good. Dua is the key to all good. Well, there. And in order to understand that, I want you to contemplate on this little clip by Shaykh Abdul Razak al-Badr, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, and I'll translate it. It's just a 1-minute clip where he gives us a narration from one of the Salaf. Okay? He narrates to us a narration from one of the Salaf. Bismillah.
معاشر الكرام، أمر مهم جدا ننتبه له في باب الدعاء ألا وهو.
So the Shaykh says that the congregation, an important matter that we have to pay attention to when it comes to dua.
أن الدعاء مفتاح كل خير في الدنيا والآخرة.
That's that dua is a key to all good in this world and the hereafter. طيب.
حتى إن أحد السلف قال كلمة عجيبة.
So one of the Salaf said he made a very amazing statement.
قال تأملت في الخير فإذا هو كثير.
He said, I contemplate and I thought to myself about khair, good deeds, the good things that we can do. And he's like, I found khair is so many things. There's so many things you can do in terms of good deeds. There's salah.
صلاة خير والحج خير الزكاة خير الصدقة خير.
Salah is khair, zakah is khair, Sawm is khair, sadaqah is like, all of these are good deeds. So he was thinking about all the different good deeds that somebody can do. He's just thinking and contemplating.
وإذا كل هذا الخير بيد الله.
But then all of this khair and all of these good deeds are in the hands of Allah. All of them.
فأيقنت أن الدعاء مفتاح كل خير في الدنيا والآخرة.
So he said, I came to the conclusion and I realized that dua is the key to all khair in this world and the hereafter. Because if your tawfiq and your success and the ability to do all of these good deeds, which all of us aspire to do, if all of that belongs and is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then our only way to get to that is by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which means that indeed dua is the key to all good. It is the key that opens up for you all the doors of goodness.
ولهذا وأنت تدعو الله سبحانه وتعالى كن على دراية تامة بهذا الأمر.
But he said, when you are calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're making dua, make sure you remember this important affair.
أن صلاح دينك وصلاح دنياك وصلاح آخرتك هذا كله بيد الله.
that the rectification of your religion, that your religion is rectified, and your dunya is rectified, and all of your affairs are rectified, all of this, and your deen, it is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember this.
ولهذا كن مستحضرا هذا الافتقار الشديد إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى.
So always remember, he says, this need, this great need that you have of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that you do. All of your acts of worship. Remember that you are in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that without him, you would not have done this act of worship.
وأنك لا غنى لك عن سؤاله واللجوء إليه والضراعة بين يديه.
And that you have absolutely no way to protect yourself from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything. They have absolutely no way to protect yourself. I'll end up opening another video. 1 minute. Somehow I clicked on a link to open my own live stream. And now struggling to close it. I think it's this one. There we go. طيب. واضح? So he says that always remember your dire need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to all of this khair. And that obviously brings us and shows us what we just mentioned, which is dua is the key to all good. واضح? Is that clear, everyone? Is it now clear what's meant by that statement? And this is something what? Specific to dua. And that's why I said to you, we're going to talk about things that are unique to dua. We're going to talk about things that are unique to dua. I asked you earlier on Woo Club, tell me what's unique to dua. Now you tell me what other act of worship has this in common with dua. No other act of worship has this in common with dua. Because like the person from the set of the statement was, all of the khair is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All acts of worship are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the one that gives you ability to do it. And the way to get there and to get it from Allah is by asking him for it. And now, contemplate on Surah Al-Fatiha. Contemplate on Surah Al-Fatiha. What is Surah Al-Fatiha? Surah Al-Fatiha is dua. As a matter of fact, my dear brothers and sisters, sorry for a little bit sidetracking here, but Surah Al-Fatiha is a very special place in my heart and all of your hearts, I'm sure. But Surah Al-Fatiha, it is a dua. And it's the best dua. There's no better dua on the face of the earth that's ever been revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than Surah Al-Fatiha. Surah Al-Fatiha is the best dua. Okay? What do we ask Allah for in Surah Al-Fatiha? We ask Allah, we say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. Help in what? Our exams? No. You alone we ask for help in our worship. In other words, oh Allah, we acknowledge our purpose in life, that we should worship you alone, but we need your aid, oh Allah. We can't worship you without your help, without your aid. We ask you for your aid to worship you. You see how dua is the key to all good? So all the ibadah that you want to do, you need isti'ana, you need dua for that. Okay? You need dua for that. So then you ask Allah for help, and the first thing that you need, the first step towards accepted ibadah is guidance. Guide us to it by giving us the ability to know and to act, and you know the rest of the surah. واضح? Dua is the key to all good. طيب. Then we have dua is the greatest means of all, to the extent that it can even repel qadr. Now this is such an important point, which can also be very complicated, right? But we'll give it a try, inshallah. Okay? As a matter of fact, let me cover this one last. First, let's start with the next one after that, which is that dua is easy. Okay? And it's the easiest way to get what you want. All of us have what? We have objectives. There's things we want to reach. The shortest way to get what you want is through the door of dua. That's why I want you to contemplate on this hadith. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, أعجز الناس من عجز عن الدعاء وأبخل الناس من بخل بالسلام. The most incompetent of people, like, incompetence, like literally, you're the most incompetent person, like you have no ability. You are, I don't mean incompetence as in incapacitated, like you're not able to. La. Incompetent as in something that is so easy you don't do it. The most incompetent of people, if you like, are who? The one who fails to make dua. Why? Because it's such an easy thing. I mean, why do you think, my dear brothers and sisters, people who beg on the streets, yes, why do you think they're sitting outside all day begging people instead of getting a job? Because it's easier to just ask people than go out and work, right? Dua is the easiest thing ever. Allah said, ask me, I'll give you. So if you actually fail to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you know that Allah has promised to give you, if you ask Him, then you're incompetent. What benefit do you have? And the Prophet said the greediest and stingiest of persons are the people who are greedy or stingy when it comes to salam. Again, another thing. Someone says to you, Assalamu alaikum, to say wa alaikum salam, what does that take? Doesn't cost any money, doesn't cost any effort. Why would you not give back the salam? You are the greediest of people. So, dua is the easiest way to get what you want. It's just a moving of your tongue. فالدعاء أمره يسير جدا على كل أحد. فهو لا يتطلب جهدا عند القيام به. It doesn't need any effort for you to do it. ولا يلحق الداعي بسببه تعب. It doesn't make you tired. ولا مشقة. It doesn't cause any hardship. ولهذا فإن العجز عنه والتواني في أدائه هو أشد العجز. Not being able to do it with the immense benefits that he has, that's pure incompetence. واضح? So that's another thing that is quite unique to dua. But then some of you might say, and this is the irony, really. This is one of the most astonishing things in the world, which is how dua is so easy, but at the same time, nobody does it. Okay? And this is one of the things that sometimes can cause you confusion. For example, if you walk into a shop and you see, or you walk on the street, you see a guy selling an iPhone for 200, or let's say 100 pounds, 50 pounds. Basically selling it for peanuts. And instead of people all lining up to buy it off him, nobody's buying from him. It automatically causes you what? Automatically causes you to think to yourself, it must be a scam. Why? Because why is nobody going for it? So sometimes what happens to us is that dua being so easy, and at the same time, we see people not doing it. As a matter of fact, we might not have been even brought up from a young age to make dua all the time. Our parents, and this is the ajib thing, right? Generally speaking, parents want the best for their children. The best for their children. But how many parents cultivate their kids upon dua so their kids can get the best that they want? Right? How many parents cultivate their kids from a young age that, oh, my son, if you want something, ask Allah. Raise your hands, make dua, and constantly repeat it. They don't. A lot of parents, they don't. So from a young age, you didn't see your parents make a lot of dua. People, maybe when you saw knowledge from in the masjid, it's not such a big thing. You come to the masjid, salah time, people walk in just for the iqama. You don't really see a lot of people making dua. So what happens is you think to yourself, the value, kind of like you start doubting the benefits and the reward for dua because of what you see other people doing. Just like the example that I gave you, right? So what's the answer to this? In other words, Ustad, if dua is so easy, why doesn't everybody make dua? Now that's the point. That's something that allows you now to realize what tawfiq means, that Allah gives you success and ability. And I say this, wallahi, addressing myself before I talk to you. I'm talking to myself, wallahi, right? That when I look at myself and you see how easy dua is and then how neglectful we are, and I just think to myself that this is tawfiq. I need to make dua to Allah to give me the tawfiq to make dua. Really, that's where we are. That we know dua, we know its power, we know we can achieve by way of it. But at the same time, it's the heaviest thing on us. It's the most difficult thing. It's the last thing we think about. We need money. We're stuck. Things are difficult. Yallah, let me make a few phone calls. Yeah, Fulan, yeah, can I borrow some money? He went to the doctor. He said, you've got this disease, whatever. First thing we do, let me call my other friend who's a doctor. Let me get a second opinion. Let me do this. Let me call that person. Oh, let me fundraise. Oh, which hospital I go to. Let me Google search, whatever. You take all of the means that you should take, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that, huh? Take the means. But you forget the greatest of all means, which is making dua. Now that's sad. That's sad. So this is one of the most, this is the things that subhanAllah, when you think about it, it truly allows you to realize what tawfiq really means. Tawfiq is not just knowing. It's not just having the knowledge or the awareness. Tawfiq is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why brings us to the next point, which is dua is the greatest sign of glad tidings. Is the greatest sign that you can have that tells you that, hey, you know that thing, that the objective that you have, you're going to make it, you're going to get it. Okay? Dua is the greatest sign. That's why Ibn al-Qayyim, he mentions that فمتى وفق العبد للدعاء فمتى وفق العبد للدعاء كانت علامة له وأمارة على أن حاجته انقضت. He says that whenever a servant is given the ability to make dua, whereby now he's making constant and regular dua, asking for that which he wants, then this is a sign and a clear signpost that the thing that he's looking for, he will get it. Khalas. He's got it. It's in the bank now. That's Allah has given you the ability now to make dua all the time, right? Constantly. And you see yourself making dua, then that's a good sign. واضح? That's why Umar, the statement that we've sent, that we've shared many times before, إني لا أحمل هم الإجابة, he said. He said, I don't carry the load and the stress of my dua being accepted. I'm not worried about that. ولكني أحمل هم الدعاء. What I'm stressed about is the load and the responsibility of actually making dua. So if I'm given the ability to make dua, then the response will come with it. It's part and parcel. It comes as one package. Contemplate on this. Do you understand what I'm saying? Right now, there are things you want in your life. There are things that you're struggling with. Right as I speak to you right now, there are things, objectives that you have in life, things you want to achieve. Right? If after this lecture and tomorrow's lecture and day after, going forward, now you're someone who's making regular dua that fulfills the conditions with no impediments, and it draws you near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that's a sign that that thing is on its way. Inshallah. Alama. That's why there's a very beautiful statement by Ata ibn Abi Rabah, where he mentions that if you find yourself constantly asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Jannat al-Firdaus, pay attention. He says you find yourself to be someone last third of the night in sujood, during tahiyyat, just all the time you're saying, oh Allah, inni as'aluka Jannat al-Firdaus. It's on your tongue. He said, if you find yourself always asking Allah for Jannat al-Firdaus, then know that Allah wants to enter you in Jannat al-Firdaus. Allah. Wow. That's what? Allah wants to enter me Jannat al-Firdaus? What a glad tiding. But why? How come? Because he said, for indeed, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want to enter you in Jannat al-Firdaus, He wouldn't have given you the ability to constantly ask for it. واضح? He wouldn't have given you the ability to constantly ask for it. Especially if you're a person of Tawheed. This is from me, I'm adding this just to clarify a misconception you might have. Some person might say, yeah, but I know my cousin who's a Sufi grave worshipper and he always asks for Jannat al-Firdaus. Is he going to go Jannah? No. If you're constantly asking for Jannah Firdaus and you're especially someone who fulfills the conditions, you're upon Tawheed. You're someone who knows dua and the ins and the outs and the wajibat and the conditions and the mawani', and you live a life, that on top of the dua al-mas'ala, there's dua al-ibadah there as well, and all of it is for Allah. You don't fall into shirk, then wallahi, that's a very good sign. And that applies to everything. طيب. Now going on to the last point, and this is a deep point, and I've gone over time. So I seek your permission. Shall we cover this? Which is dua being the greatest means of all, to the extent that it can even repel qadr. طيب. All right. Let's cover this then, inshallah. So, the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, what is qadr? Okay. Qadr is pre-decree. Okay. Qadr is pre-decree. Basically is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like we all know, before we've been created, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written down everything that's going to happen. Why? Because Allah knows everything that's going to happen. Okay. Now that doesn't mean Allah forces us to do what we do. Rather, it just means it's a manifestation that Allah knows, and Allah has commanded the pen to write it down. So this is what we call pre-decree. We call it qadr. Now the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, لا يرد القدر إلا الدعاء. Qadr, pre-decree, is not repelled except by way of dua. Only dua can repel qadr. Now this hadith, it clears up a very challenging question that a lot of you struggle with, but it also raises another question. Right? Also raises another question. Dua repelling qadr. How is that possible? Does that mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wrote something down, or that the pen wrote it down based on the knowledge of Allah, and then your dua is something Allah didn't know about, and then when you make dua, now the Lawh al-Mahfuz is updated and it's changed? No, that's not what it means. That's not what it means. واضح? That's not what it means. Rather, what it means is that dua itself is also from the qadr. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made pre-decreed that something were to befall you, right? But then Allah also knew, and Allah knows, that you would make dua, and that your dua then would prevent that thing from befalling you, which means it won't befall you. You understand? So the qadr, the dua itself is qadr. So you're repelling qadr with qadr. It's not that the dua is outside the knowledge of Allah and it's something that, it just came up. No. Allah knew you would make dua. But that dua that you made was the reason for that calamity which would have befallen you not to befall you. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge. Allah knows everything that is, everything that will become. Allah knows everything that's happening now. And Allah knows everything that will not happen. And if it were to happen, how it would have happened. Allah knows all of this. Okay? So that's one thing. Hopefully I've cleared that one up. Which is that it doesn't mean that the dua is something new that wasn't in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, that wasn't written down, that Allah didn't know about, and then it repelled the qadr which was written down. That's not what it means. It means that both of them were qadr. واضح? طيب. Just like the way that in the qadr there is your timeline of your qadr, that you have a child, and then another qadr is that maybe that child dies. Okay, so that qadr follows on from this qadr. So it's in terms of events, what was going to happen, Allah knew all of it. Okay? طيب. That's one thing. All right. But then, based on this understanding, yes, or just based on generally speaking that qadr means that everything has been written down and everything is known by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it causes, it comes up with a question. Or some people, they misunderstood that. They misunderstand qadr. They misunderstand the whole connection between dua and asbab and qadr and all these things, this whole topic. They completely messed up, especially the Sufis. Okay? So they say something like this. Okay, pay attention to Ibn al-Qayyim, the question he poses and how he answers it. He says, ها هنا سؤال مشهور. Here there's an important question. He said there's famous question. وهو أن المدعو به إن كان قد قدر. Okay, I might as well just close his book. He says, أن المدعو به, and this is from the book الداء والدواء. I can also open it within the book actually as opposed to the outline. I don't know which one you guys prefer. Let's read it from the book directly. طيب. So here he says, ها هنا سؤال مشهور. That's an important question. وهو أن المدعو به إن كان قد قدر لم يكن بد من وقوعه. So basically the person is saying that which Allah has pre-decreed is going to happen, regardless if the person makes dua or doesn't. And if it was not meant to happen, as it is not in the qadar, then it won't happen, regardless if the servant asks for it or not. So based on that, some people, they left off dua. And they said, there's no benefit in dua. What's the point of dua? You see? So they came across this kind of statement, this hadith that, about qadar, that everything is pre-decreed. And then based on that, they said, okay, there's no point in making dua then. There's no point of making dua. Now, this is a question, a challenging question that maybe even some of you struggle with. Okay, let me actually ask that question. Okay, so did this or similar question ever cross your mind? Yes. Let me just make an open-ended question actually. Aywa. Ever crossed your mind before? Because obviously it's a trap from the traps of shaitan, and kind of like, it's like, okay, what's the point of making dua? It's already accepted, and it's already written down, the qadr is there. I ask for it, and it's something that it's a door from the door of shaitan, but inshallah ta'ala, after this lesson and after we reach Ibn al-Qayyim's kalam, it will be cleared up, inshallah. Because again, it goes back to our misunderstanding of qadar and dua and these sort of things, right? Naam, qadr in general is a bit hard to grasp, I agree with you. Naam. But inshallah ta'ala, I want you to pay attention then. So that's the question. Now what's the answer? He says that, first he says, وَهَؤُلَاءِ مَعَ فَرْطِ جَهْلِهِمْ وَضَلَالِهِمْ مُتَنَاقِضُونَ. First thing he says is that these people that believe this, on top of their ignorance and their misguidance, they're also full of contradiction. Why? فإن طرد مذهبهم يوجب تعطيل جميع الأسباب. Because with this kind of understanding, all of the means and what's called asbab, as in that some things are reasons for others happening, right? Allah Ta'ala, He's the one who's created the reasons and their consequences. He's the one that's created the means and the consequences. If you believe this, then He says, then this would necessitate that you don't believe in any of the asbab, yani the means that cause things to happen. Now, let me, he's going to give you an example, good example that will clear it up. He says, فَيُقَالُ لِأَحَدِهِمْ, said to one of them, if being full or being quenched, your thirst being quenched, is something that has been written down in the qadar. In other words, after you eat a meal and you're full and you're not hungry anymore, or you drink water and your thirst is quenched, this is from the qadar, right? This is written in the qadar. Today you're going to sleep, mashallah, with your belly full, right? So if that is bound to happen anyway, right, then it will happen, regardless if you eat or if you don't eat. And if it's not going to happen, and Allah hasn't written it down for it to happen, then it won't happen. Even if you eat, it won't happen. Likewise, when it comes to having children, yes, if it's written for you to have kids, you'll have kids, regardless if you get married and you have relations with your wife or not. The child's going to come. Okay? And if it's not written for you to have kids, وَإِن لَمْ يُقَدَّرْ لَمْ يَكُنْ. If it's not written for you to have kids, you won't have kids, regardless if you get married or not. فلا حاجة إلى التزوج. There's no need to get married. What's the point? And so on and so forth. So he says, does any عاقل or human being, he says, فهل يقول هذا عاقل? Does any person with intellect say something like this? Rather, the حيوان, the animals, are better than such a person in terms of understanding. Because the animals, even the animals, they avoid things that will cause them problems, and they take the means in order to achieve what they want to achieve. The cow will go out and graze to become full, and they'll do it, they will mate and do everything they need to do in order to have offspring, right? Is that clear? طيب. So then he says, rahimahullah, as-sawab. And this is the answer, basically, the conclusion, the answer is that there's a third category. Okay, so the questioner, he made one of two categories. He said, there's no difference. If you make dua or you don't make dua, yes, his qadr is written, it's not going to make a difference. He made two categories. But here he says there's a third category, which is أن هذا المقدور قدر بأسباب, which is that this thing that has been pre-decreed upon you to happen, Allah has pre-decreed it along with its means. So for example, someone, his time for death has come. His death is not the only thing that has been pre-decreed. Also, the means or the things that will cause his death have also been pre-decreed. Maybe that car accident or that disease or whatever. Both of them have been pre-decreed. Okay? Likewise, someone is going to have children. Okay? Allah pre-decreed that you're going to have a child named Fulan. But Allah has also decreed that you're going to marry his mother, Fulana. Okay? That's the sabab. So Allah has decreed both. So Allah Ta'ala did not pre-decree things in isolation of their means by themselves, without a means, without something that caused that to happen. Allah has decreed all of it. This is from the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how Allah has created the universe. واضح? So everything Allah has pre-decreed it along with its sabab, along with the means that caused that thing to happen. واضح? So if the servant takes the means, then the qadr, that thing which has been maqdur, will happen. But if he doesn't take the means, then that which is maqdur will not happen, because it has been pre-decreed that he wouldn't take the means. واضح? So just the way that it was pre-decreed that he's going to be full and his thirst is going to be quenched and that he's going to have a child. صح? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has pre-decreed that he's going to be full by him eating, and he's going to have a child by marrying. Okay? And that he's going to have his trees grow in his gardens by him planting the seeds. Okay? And that an animal will die when you slaughter it. Okay? And same thing goes to Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has pre-decreed that someone will go to Jannah by way of the good deeds that he does. So Allah has pre-decreed for him to go Jannah, and he's pre-decreed for him to do the righteous deeds that will make him go Jannah. And same thing when he goes to going to hellfire. وهذا القسم هو الحق. This is the truth. هو الذي حرمه السائل ولم يوفق له. This third category is the correct category, and not the two categories that he gave, the false categories. It's about this. It's about the fact that Allah pre-decreed everything along with its means, is asbab. Now based on that, now coming back now to dua. وحينئذ فالدعاء من أقوى الأسباب. Now based on that, dua is the greatest means of all. فإذا قدر وقوع المدعو به بالدعاء لم يصح أن يقال لا فائدة في الدعاء. So if that which is pre-decreed for you was bound to happen because of the dua that you make, it can't be said that there's no benefit in the dua. Just like we don't say there's no benefit in eating and drinking and getting married. Of course there's benefit in it, because the other things that carry on from that, you eat, you become full, you marry, you have children. It's a consequence of that. So that's the benefit of getting married. So out of all of the means to achieve your objectives, the most beneficial means is your dua. And is the thing that is most likely will allow you to achieve your objective. واضح? So that's why I said earlier, when we have a need, or we struggle with something, before you pick up the phone and you make some calls to borrow some money because you're in financial difficulties, first go and make wudu and pray salah and make dua. Perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make a door for you, will open up a door for you without the need of you asking other people for help and aid. So just the way that getting this loan is a means for you to pay your bills. It's a means. That's why you're taking. Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, that's connection there. Everybody hear me? Right. No, it's not because of Wi-Fi. It's because I have a timer on my laptop that turns off the laptop when it's almost salat time. So it's almost salat time in about, I think, 15 minutes. So that's why my laptop actually turned off. I had to turn it back on. Right. So to conclude then, and I have to be quick here, just the way that you making that phone call to get a loan, to pay off your bill, is a means that you take, a step that you take to achieve your objective. Likewise, you going and making some wudu and praying salah and asking Allah to make a way out for you is a means for you to reach your objective. And out of the two, the dua is more powerful, more likely for you to meet your objective, and it will draw you nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you will be rewarded, and it will increase your aqeedah, it will increase your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wadih. That's why Ibn Qayyim, he says, that's why the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, since they are the most knowledgeable of this ummah when it comes to Allah and His Messenger and the religion, كانوا أقوم بهذا السبب وشروطه وآدابه من غيرهم. That's why they were the most upright of people when it comes to taking this particular means of dua and fulfilling its conditions and its etiquettes. That's why Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, what he used to do is يستنصر به على عدوه. When it comes to seeking aid and fighting against his enemies, dua was one of his tools, his biggest tool. وكان أعظم جنديه. Okay, Umar had two armies. One army is the Muslims. The other army is his dua. And that was the greater of the two armies that he had. The greater of the tools that he had. وكان يقول للصحابة لستم تنصرون بكثرة. You are not given victory because of your big numbers. وإنما تنصرون من السماء. You're only given victory from the sky, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Never forget that. And he used to say, إني لا أحمل هم الإجابة. I'm not worried and I don't carry the burden of Allah responding to my dua. ولكن هم الدعاء. Rather, I carry the burden of actually making dua. فإذا ألهمت الدعاء. If I'm inspired to make dua, then the response and Allah Ta'ala's acceptance comes with it. If you ever asked yourself, how was it possible for the companions radiallahu anhum and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and the companions to have achieved what they have achieved, which, like I've told you many times before, some of the, I think, non-Muslim historians put it like, is like as likely as the Eskimos, yes, overcoming America and Russia and the big superpowers. Like a small group of Arabs in the middle of nowhere, no empire, Bedouins, how did they reach and done what they've done? If you ever asked yourself that question, it's not because of numbers, it's because of dua. It's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was on their side. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened up the doors of khair to them. Why? Because they established dua in both of its forms. The dua al-ibadah and the dua al-mas'alah. In terms of ibadah, they pleased Allah. In terms of mas'alah, they always turned towards Allah and asked Allah before anything else. That's why they have achieved what they have achieved. And we'll come to that and we'll talk about that inshallah tomorrow when we talk about the status of dua within Islam, especially when we look at how the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has talked about the prophets in the Quran and the way they make dua. The way they make dua. واضح؟ طيب. We'll suffice with that inshallah. Barakallah feekum. What is the status of dua in Islam is the only thing that is left really, and a few other things. But inshallah ta'ala we'll cover that tomorrow. This one is actually is a lot related to tomorrow's topic, which is why you should make dua. Inshallah, today you understand what dua is, and tomorrow we'll talk about and we'll motivate you and talk about all of the reasons why you should make dua. واضح؟ هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد. One last thing that I would like to share with you all is, I did say to you at the beginning that, and please forgive me, I probably won't be able to answer questions, but I did tell you at the beginning that this particular course, even though it's not the course that I wanted to deliver as a full package, but I decided to at least get it started so that, before Arafah we can benefit from this particular opportunity, and then we can always expand on this inshallah. But one important aspect that I wanted to be part of this course, which I still want to be part of this course, is the aspect of actually learning the du'as. Okay, now I wanted to explain every dua in more detail. That is not going to be possible, unfortunately, but at least what we can do is everyone should be able to either memorize the du'as, a certain number of du'as, or at least know how to read them properly in Arabic from the book. And we would rely on the book by Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Badr, which I've shared before in the group, this one, and this is also translated, by the way. And this is a book that has been praised a lot by many different scholars. Many different scholars have praised this book, especially when it comes to the amount or the selection of du'as that the Sheikh has mentioned in this book from the prophetic sunnah and from the Quran. So it's a beautiful selection. In total, I think it's about 30 du'as from the sunnah and maybe another 20 or 30 from the Quran. And it's something that, if you can't memorize it, at least you should be able to read it in Arabic. And then inshallah in the future, we'll try and make sure you also understand the meanings. Okay? So I was thinking of setting up either one of two things, either a workshop, hiring some teachers. I can't do it, unfortunately. I can't conduct a workshop, don't have time for that. But I do have quite good teachers that can help with the reading part or the memorization part. Hire some teachers. I've got a few people in mind, few of the Arabic teachers that we employ, or hire other teachers and set up a workshop where the brothers obviously segregated with the ustad and sisters with the ustada. And then you log into the workshop and you read to the ustada from the book, or you memorize and you read from your memory. Either way, it doesn't matter. So I was thinking of actually doing that. Okay, that would allow you then, at least by Arafah time, you're able to read the Arabic. You see, you can read the Arabic at least. So I'm not sure. It's the name of the author. It's Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Badr's father. So Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Badr, he's the author of the book that we're teaching, Fiqh al-Ad'i wal-Adhkar. His father, Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, has a book called Tafsir al-Nasik. It's actually a book on Hajj and Umrah, but it has a nice selection of du'as when he talks about Yom Arafah. Okay. So yeah, I want to do that inshallah ta'ala. Now I'm going to share with you then a link. Barakallah feekum. Fill out that link. We'll see how the interest is. And then we'll reach out to you and then see if we can work out a good time. And also, Barakallah feekum, I would encourage you all as well to, and you'll find in the link as well in the form, to support these kind of efforts inshallah ta'ala, because obviously I'm going to be hiring a teacher. It's going to cost money. And obviously all the other efforts that we do, there's a lot of things outstanding in terms of the different courses that we want to upload on the website. I initially used to rely on some volunteers which was great. I mean, may Allah reward them, but a volunteer will give you the extra time that they have. So when something happens in their life, then that extra time goes away. So I'm done with volunteers. Going forward, inshallah ta'ala, if anything needs to be done, I'm just going to hire someone. So I've got a lot of the durus. I wanted it to be uploaded to the website, but I need to hire people for that. So I would encourage you all, inshallah ta'ala, to, in these blessed days, of course, to benefit from this opportunity to aid in the khair and to contribute whatever you can, inshallah. If you can't, no problem. It's not a condition, of course. The durus are still free. They're still available. The workshops will happen according to our ability, of course, and whoever we can cater for based on the support that we receive. Barakallahu feekum. They will happen, inshallah ta'ala. So fill out that form that I've just sent. And obviously within the form itself, I mean, the form will ask you a few questions. I tried to keep it as concise as possible. Maybe I can go over it quickly. But it's just to get a better understanding of what the need is really. So if you look at the form you have, it's going to ask you to click start. Obviously, you're going to write your name and then your last name and then your email and then select your gender. Of course, it's very important so that we know which workshop you should be in. Then it's going to ask you if you would prefer to read the du'as to the teacher via a live Zoom workshop or via a Telegram group voice notes. That's also possible. So the workshop might not work for everyone in terms of timings. So we're also looking to set up a Telegram group whereby you can go to the group and then record your reading of that particular dua, and then the teacher can give feedback and make any corrections if needed, inshallah. So again, like I said, it's going to be limited to the resources that we have and the teachers that we hire. So then the question after that would be, what's your main objective is also important. You want to be able to read the dua properly in Arabic, or do you want to memorize the dua in Arabic? Because we might make separate groups maybe for those who want to memorize and those who want to read. And then obviously after that, can you read Arabic by yourself is a good important question, because if you can't, then you'll struggle. And we might have to go look for a transliteration or something because it's written in Arabic. And then it's going to ask you to support the cause if you can. And if you select yes, you have two options, either one of contribution or small contribution via Patreon, becoming a Patreon, or you can do both. If you already support, I know a lot of you already do, Jazakallah khair, you can still continue to support more, or you can click on I already support. And if you can't, you can't. At the end of the day, there's no, if you like, compulsion here. It just depends on your ability, and we all, it's a shared, if you like, effort that we're doing. We'll do what we can, bi'idhnillah al-kareem. And after you obviously select, if you select yes, and you select these two, then make sure, and a lot of you forget to do this. After you make the one of contribution, and you write whatever, you can do card payment, which is better, or you can do PayPal. Don't forget to click here, by the way, because then that will take you to the next step. Okay? If you selected this as well, same thing. If you do become a patron when you're done, make sure you click here, because I'm afraid that some of you might navigate outside to Patreon or PayPal and then forget to come back to the form. And then we won't have your name, we won't have your email, and you're going to be waiting for an email to be invited to a Telegram group, and it's not going to happen because you haven't submitted the form. So after you go and you go to PayPal or Patreon, make sure you come back and you click on I've become a Patreon. Then you just confirm your email, and that's it. Make sure you click on submit in the final page. And that's it. Keep an eye on your email for further updates. We'll reach out to you, inshallah ta'ala. طيب. Naam, it's live streamed to YouTube. It's live streamed to YouTube, alhamdulillah. Also, maybe some of you don't want to join the workshop, but you do want to support. So I'm going to post the separate PayPal links, inshallah ta'ala, so that you can just go straight to that without having to go through the form. Okay? So I'll post it as well in the links. So this is PayPal. That's for one-off contribution. And if you want to become a Patreon, then I'll place that as well, inshallah. But if you do want to join the workshops, then of course, make sure you fill out the form. واضح؟ Barakallah feekum. Ustad, what is the word that sounds like rather you say a lot at end of sentence? Is the Arabic word? طبعا. That word? واضح. واضح means clear. طبعا means of course. Ustad, is hadith saying dua is ibadah? This dua is which type of dua, and can this be used as a dalil against the Ash'aris? I don't know what you mean by as a dalil against the Ash'aris. But الدعاء هو العبادة is very similar in meaning as the other hadith. And it just means that the essence of ibadah is dua. It's one of the most important forms of worship. واضح? And it shows you that making dua to other than Allah, it's shirk. Because shirk is صرف العبادة لغير الله. Shirk is to worship others besides Allah. So, since dua is ibadah, making dua to other than Allah is also shirk. Because it's basically worshipping other than Allah. Because a lot of the Sufis, they argue and they say, no, dua is not ibadah. I'm not making ibadah. I'm just requesting from this wali because he's closer to Allah than me, whatever. We say to them, la. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called dua ibadah in the Quran in many places. Okay, it's not for you now to come around and say dua is not ibadah. Dua is ibadah. So that's obviously the major benefit we take from the hadith, which is actually one of the points that I wanted to make, which I didn't really get to, which is the most important thing you should remember about dua. Huh? Who wants to answer this? What is the one thing you should always remember about dua? One thing. Okay? If anything, what's the one thing that somebody said to you, remember this about dua, what would it be? I'll ask on WooClap actually. What is the one thing you should always remember about dua? Someone said it is an obligation. Okay, that's an important thing to remember, but that's not the one thing. When making dua, have hope. No. Now, even put in caps, mashallah, ahsant. And I'm sure you must have benefited from the context. Sometimes you have to read the room. I was just talking about ibadah and tawheed and dua being ibadah. It should only be for Allah. This is the one thing you should remember about dua. Dua is for Allah alone. Why? Because if you oppose this principle, may Allah protect us. If somebody opposes this principle, he calls upon Allah. Naam, he makes dua, but he also calls upon other than Allah. Then all of his dua will be rejected. None of his dua will ever be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't matter if he makes dua for another 500 years. As long as he doesn't make tawbah and he's still upon that act of shirk, of calling upon other than Allah, Allah does not accept good deeds from al-mushrikun. Now, I'm not talking about someone who fell into it out of ignorance, who the proof hasn't been established. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about someone who regularly calls upon other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knowing that it is shirk. Then none of his du'as will be accepted. واضح? So if you're going to remember one thing about dua, the one thing that will give you hope of your dua being accepted is your tawheed. So dua is for Allah alone. That's the most important thing to remember about dua. واضح? That's the word, واضح. أيوة. نعم. بارك الله فيكم. طيب, inshallah, we'll suffice with that. Before we leave, like always, please share the main takeaways that you got out of this class. Comment by sharing. 1 minute. Place that from the channel. Now, please comment by sharing what resonated with you and highlight key takeaways. So, I always encourage you to take notes, and then at the end of the class, when you get to this stage, just share what stands out to you, or that one thing that you think is important. No problem. Barakallahu feekum. Ayakumullah. Dua is reinforcement of your aqidah. Nah. إياكم بارك الله فيكم. If there's any questions I've missed out on, please post it again tomorrow, inshallah. دعاء can repel qadr. Ask Allah always for Jannat al-Firdaus and for tawfiq. To always ask for it. You need to ask Allah for tawfiq to make dua. No. Dua is the key to all good. There. Allahu Akbar. Can't find the link to answer the question. I mean, we're done with it now, but it's WooClap. I could post it again if you want. Tomorrow's session is at 9 p.m. inshallah. Mecca time, 7 p.m. UK. 9 p.m. Mecca time, 7 p.m. UK inshallah. Just keep an eye on the channel inshallah. Okay. حياكم الله. طيب. جزاكم الله خيرا everyone. بارك الله فيكم. I'll see you tomorrow inshallah. هذا الله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'm going to repost the links as well in the group channel inshallah. Those of you that have missed it.